Hello, everybody. Welcome to our February session of Third Tuesdays. Welcome, welcome, welcome. Please put in the chat your name, your pronouns, where you are logging in from this evening. We are really excited to have you here. This is a webinar, but we promise you that it's going to be engaging, it's going to be inspiring, encouraging, and you're going to be very informed this evening. So we encourage you as we are speaking, as we are coming in, that you put in your name, your pronouns, and where you are logging in from this evening. I see New York, I see Philadelphia, I see Los Angeles, so many people from so many places. I heard that we have 722 people registered. That is very exciting, and we're really happy to be with you this evening. I wanted to give a shout out to Brenda Fassie. As you were coming on, the music of Brenda Fassie was playing. She is a South African legend. She was an activist. She's passed away now, but she was an activist, a dancer, a musician, and she was named the Queen of African Pop. And so, really happy to have her music. I also wanted to give a shout out to the lady who designed my dress. She's a Kenyan designer, and I wanted to rock her tonight because, when we talk about Black people and Black people collectively and individually, we've experienced a lot of pain and struggle and trauma, but we also celebrate Black joy and creativity and love and knowledge. And so this is Black History Month, and so we want to invite you to learn from us, to celebrate with us as we hear from our very dynamic speakers this evening. So one of the things I want you to do, in addition to putting your name and your location and your pronouns, is to just put in the chat. What kind of diaspora you belong to. Diaspora is a group of people that came from another part of the world historically and settled and created culture, created community. So we want you to share with us what kind of diaspora you belong to and what does it mean to be part of a diaspora, okay? And I've shared with you, for me, it means food, it means culture, it means knowledge, it means celebration, it means African pride and African American pride. And so put that in the chat for us. We want to be able to celebrate you. We see Jewish diaspora. We see Western Massachusetts. We see lots of ancestry represented in the chat. So my name is Anyango Regi Gregory. I am the Associate Regional Director for the South Region of American Friends Service Committee. Third Tuesdays is a monthly webinar series that brings together FSC constituents to learn about protest, resistance, and to protect we learn how to protect, resist, and to build just peace, just migration, and just economy. So we're really happy to have you here. I am very honored and feeling very privileged to host this month's third Tuesdays, because there's a special focus on Black history and Black migration, Black migrants. The two people that are going to be part of this dialogue with me are people that I deeply respect and admire, Serge and Grace, and we have worked closely together, most recently on a Black Learning series, which was an opportunity for us to dialogue and to learn and to share, to do cultural exchanges between Africans and African Americans and people of African descent from the Caribbean. And so we are excited to share what we learned and what we do in our communities around Black migration. Today, Serge and Grace are going to talk about migrants and the history of Black migrants and the history of solidarity between what Professor Ali Mazrui calls Africans of the soil, those who are born and raised on the African continent. But then they're also solidarity with Africans of the blood, those who are people of African descent who ended up across the globe because of what we frankly, it was human trafficking. And so according to the African Union, you will see that there's actually 6 regions of Africa, the North, the South, the East, and the West, and the diaspora is the 6th region. There are about 200 million people of African descent living outside the African continent, significant population of those people live in North, South America, and the Caribbean. And so we've also seen a more recent migration of people of African descent who are coming from different parts of the five regions of Africa and have settled in Europe, in the Americas, in Australia, in Asia, and they're creating new cross-cultural identities. And so we want to talk about those neo-diaspora, as we call them, the new diaspora, and how we work in solidarity with the diaspora who came to the Americas and Europe and the Caribbean through slavery. And so people came, some of those neo-diaspora people came because of work, education, exploration, love, reunification. People came for various reasons, and some of them came, they were forced to come here because of economic hardships and natural disasters and political upheaval. So we just want to emphasize that people, Black folks are here for various reasons, and there are multiple diasporas, and we want to celebrate that as well. So there are three things that I want you to think about as we frame tonight's conversation. Number one is that this is Black History Month, so there's going to be an emphasis on Black migrants and solidarity with those in the African diaspora. But this is not the only conversation that AFSC is going to have around these issues. This is just one of many conversations that we are going to have. Secondly, this conversation is important to Serge, Grace, and I because oftentimes the voices and the faces and the perspectives of Black people are not included when we talk about migration. And so we feel like it's very, very important that our perspectives and our analysis is included. And thirdly, I want to mention that although we are talking about our experiences and our work, Black people are not a monolithic group. And that's a $5 word that just means that we don't represent all perspectives of all Black people everywhere. We are talking from our perspectives, our culture, our history, our experiences. And so tonight, as Serge and Grace speak, I want you to hear from that perspective. And so also I want to encourage you as they're speaking to put questions in the Q&A section. If you have questions specifically for the speakers, they will open it up for questions. They will also invite you to put things in the chat so that we keep it interactive. So remember, the chat is just for general dialogue, general comments, general feedback, and the Q&A specifically if you have a question for the speaker that you want the speakers to respond to. There's 722 people signed up. Did I say that already? 722 people. So we might not get to everything, but this is not the one and only conversation that we're going to have around these issues. So before we get started, I'm really excited about this part because I'm going to invite Grace, Serge, and I to just share a little bit about our migration stories. And so I can start. I can start with my story. I am a child of an African-American mother from Montclair, New Jersey. And you're going to understand why that's very important in a little bit when you hear Serge's story. So my mother is from Montclair, New Jersey. She's the child of, her father was a sharecropper. Her mother was a maid to white families, really good family that lived in mostly in the South and migrated to the North. My father is from western part of Kenya, from the Luo people, and the Luo are originally from South Sudan. And they migrated to different parts of Western Kenya and Tanzania and mostly Uganda and Western Kenya. And so my parents met and married because of love. So I often say that my migration story includes a lot of pain because of the difficult history of slavery on my mother's side and the diversity on my father's side, migrating from South Sudan. But they met and married as a result of love. And my mother migrated to Kenya and lived there for 27 years of her life. And I want to give a shout out to my mom. I know she's on today. And I told Serge and Grace if they could to bring something that represents something about their culture. And I brought a broom. So I don't know if you're familiar, if you can see this broom. In African American culture, there was a time when we couldn't be married the way we wanted to be married. And so people jumped the broom. And so when I got married to my husband, who's from African American man from North Carolina, this was the broom that we jumped over, and so it's very meaningful to me that we incorporated African American culture and his North Carolina culture and my African and Kenyan and all kinds of things we incorporated in our marriage and our union. Grace, what is your migration story? Tell
Well,
us.
oh, thank you, Anyango. And hello, everyone. I'm so happy to be here with you all to have the opportunity to share all of this with you, especially during Black History Month. So my name is Grace Kendeke. I am the New Hampshire Program Coordinator, and I have the extent pleasure to be working with Anyango and Serge and the rest of our amazing AFSC team. So I was born in the Democratic Republic of Congo. I was born in Kinshasa, the capital city of Congo. My family is from Congo and from Burundi. My father's family is from Burundi, but they migrated to Congo a long time ago, and so I just, consider myself to be Congolese kind of through and through. I spent the first 2 years of my life in Congo with my mother and my father, and then my mother came to the United States on the wave of a large cohort of other community members and who were just riding the wave of being able to be educated in the West with the hopes of bringing back their education and their knowledge and their skills to uplift and to really support and grow the country. And so when my mother and I came to the United States in the late 1980s, early 1990s, and we ended up settling in the Northeast in New Hampshire, where I still live with my family. But what was supposed to be a very short trip ended up to be a lifetime separation from the rest of our family. Things in Congo deteriorated due to the political situation. It became increasingly dangerous. My mother is very politically active. I think that's where I get it from. I don't think there's any mystery there. My father ended up passing away, and it just became so increasingly dangerous for us to return that we ended up staying and making the United States our permanent home. Unfortunately, it also ended up being that we ended up undocumented, which was something I didn't know until I was in high school. I was getting ready to go to colleges. I thought I was just like everybody else, except for the fact that I was born in a different country, and then come to find out that I didn't have legal status, and it completely changed the trajectory of my life. It completely changed my politics, my understanding of history and why the world is the way that it is. And it really thrust me forward into understanding and really trying to do what I could to change the circumstances that I found myself in, and that I realized that I was just one of millions of other undocumented people, millions of undocumented youth. I was a DACA recipient, so I was considered a dreamer at the time, and it was just completely something I wasn't used to, but I come from a family of activists. I come from a family of people who deeply love and care for the community, who are willing to do everything in their power to ensure that there is justice and liberation, even when the odds seem absolutely insurmountable. I always, I look back on our lives, and it was through faith and love that my mother held us together, held on, was able to keep us going, keep us surviving until I was able to get my citizenship 3 years ago. So it's been a 30+ year journey. It has included immeasurable pain, but also triumph. It is definitely the power that drives the work that I do here at AFSC. It certainly is, it's part of the ties that bind me to my family that remains back in Africa. So, even though we are oceans apart, like our hearts are always together. So that's just a little bit about me. So thanks, Anyango.
That is so beautifully said. Thank you for sharing, Grace. I didn't know the Burundi piece, so thank you for
Yeah,
that.
I found that out pretty recently too. So
Nice, very nice. Serge, are you there, Serge?
Yes, I'm here. Can you see
Can
me?
you can you say briefly your migration story before I turn it over to Grace? And please make sure you mention Montclair because I hyped up Montclair, so where my
Yeah,
mom
I
is
need to start by saying that
from.
today I live in Montclair, New Jersey, where your mom is from. So
Yes,
that's the
connection.
connection.
Yes.
And then I've been living here in Montclair for the past 17, 18 years. But I first came to the US from Cameroon. It's in Cameroon we say Central Africa, but in America we say West Africa. So that was it was so many years ago, and looking for opportunities, and trying to continue to go to school and trying to better my life and the life of people I left behind, and landed in Florida first. But I came to learn the harsh reality of racism in the South. That was some 25, 26 years ago. And there was really was a lot of, you know, opposition to, even just going to places, trying to seek for information in education institutions. And people would just look at me as if, I'm just dreaming that I want to go to school. I want to go to grad school. I mean, people refuse to give me information and direct me to community colleges. Of course, I could have gone there too, but I was like, look, I can do better. I have other degrees. So, I've faced the harsh reality of being Black as an immigrant. And so I had to move up here to New York, after a few months in Florida, where I realized that there were more opportunities. I knew a few friends up here who have moved to the US. They were here from Africa. And then we just started creating a small group there. And there were very few Cameroonians up here at the time. That was 25 years and plus ago.
Mm.
So we tried to, try to shape our own destiny. Trying to build some small community-based organizations and trying to make sense of our lives. We will meet like every 2 months or every month to just come together and talk about our challenges. How do you apply for school? How do you do this? How do you do that? It was rough, and there was a lot of discouragement within the community. If you had decided to go back to school, folk will look at you as if you were crazy. There's there are small jobs out there. First of all, you don't even have the money to go to school. You're never sure you're going to be accepted. You have to pass the English as a second language test because I only spoke French. So, but I was ambitious. I learned everything that I know about English mostly in America, and I was lucky to meet a woman who taught me how to, speak English, write English, and so we end up forming a family. So I learned a lot and learned to care about my neighbors and learned to see beyond the race despite all the challenges I was facing. So it was really organizing from my bootstraps. So I really appreciate all the experience. And today I tell all the newcomers that you have to learn how to embrace your community. You need to find that community where you belong to be of service, because we cannot come here by ourselves and continue to stay by ourselves, because you have to learn about the history of where you're landing. So we spend a lot of time as a community member just learning about where we're landing and also prepare the ground for those who came after us, which is what we're also doing here today somehow. So
Yes,
it was
absolutely.
today I like to think about some of those good people that I encounter, and I think
Mhm.
that's what I remember the most now. People who helped me grow as a person, and how I'm also using the experience to educate people around me and building more other transnational organizations, working with people in other different African countries. So, and using that experience to say, we can do better, we can defend ourselves, we can resist, we can protect ourselves. So it's built on that I'm committed to the immigration struggle. I know that I'm just a small part, but if we are there together, we can go a long way in changing life around us and beyond.
Amen. Amen. I almost said amen. Because together in Swahili we say pamoja tutashinda, which means together we win. We win together. So your part, my part, Grace's part, other people's part is all important. So thank you for indulging me, because telling our stories is a very important part of who we are as a people. So my sweet sister Grace, I'm going to turn it over to you to share.
Thank you so much, Anyago, and thank you, Serge. So what I'm gonna kind of work through with us on this first part is really to focus us by grounding us first in what we even mean by Black migration. Oftentimes, when we were pulling together as a staff, when we were thinking about the building the learning series, what would be and what we wanted initially, what would started as a learning series that really focused on only Black immigrants really expanded, because as we had these different conversations, we started to understand that the idea of Blackness, those of us who are African descended, especially when we're talking about migration, especially when we're talking about just peace and just economies, all of the issue areas that AFSC works in, that so many of these areas overlap in terms of areas of concern, areas of challenge, areas of struggle for our community, areas where we experience systemic oppression. And so it was really important for us to expand our knowledge about and to be more inclusive in who we were considering Black and inviting into this learning space. And so we really grounded it first in our history. So I'm just going to ask Barbara to actually just go to the next slide really quickly. Yes. So we'll start here. And I think what's really important as we think about Black migration is to really to think about the transatlantic slave trade as well as the intra-American slave trade, because Black migration was both involuntary for our African-American siblings, our African descended community members whose ancestors were brought to the Americas and enslaved by Europeans as well as by the US as well. And so we have to root our idea of Black migration in that in those first involuntary and violent forced migrations of our people. And so Black immigrants, to root us again, have always been a part of American history, has always been a part of Black and African American history. And so we must think of it in a very expansive way when we are looking at this. And so this map, just to give folks just a visual to kind of chew on a little bit, shows the roots of the transatlantic slave trade and the intra-American slave trade. It gives those rough estimates of how many people were taken from their homes and brought over to the Americas, how many people were taken from their homes, brought over to, some were brought over even to Europe. And the estimates now, there's great databases that are out there. We'll share some of those resources in the chat. But there were 12 million Africans that were trafficked during the transatlantic slave trade. And when we say, 12 million people, 12 million ancestors, how many descendants from that? And then the intra-American slave trade, for people who aren't as familiar with it, where there was the slave trade that occurred between the southern United States, that people were being trafficked between South America, the US South, and the Caribbean. So those are hundreds of thousands of people also being trafficked in the intra-American slave trade as well. So enslaved people, when we were brought over, they're not stagnant communities. They were dynamic. They fought to survive. They fought to hold on, to create new cultures, new connections. And so that, again, is important for us to root in when it comes to our understanding of the Black diaspora and Black migration as a whole. So fast forwarding to modern day. So I'll ask Barbara to jump up to the slide that we were at before. There we go. So to understand why migration is a Black issue. So when we think about some of these numbers, just basic data to root us in a good, solid understanding of the Black population in the United States, how many of those in the population are foreign born, how many of those are because of migration, how many of folks are US born. And so I think it's really notable the fact that the Black population in the United States continues to grow. It has grown about 30% since 2000 to now be 48.3 million people, 48.3 complex, unique people in just the United States alone, out of hundreds of millions of Black and African descended people all across the world. hundreds of millions of Black diaspora people. And so that's about 14.4% of the country's population in total. And Black immigrants make up about 10% of that of the Black population in the US, and 8.7% of non-citizens in the US. And so there are about 4 million Black people, Black immigrants in the US, and at least half of those folks are undocumented. And so certainly as I reflect back on my own story and my own connection to the diaspora, my own connection to my place within the diaspora, I see myself in those numbers. And I know many in our community do as well. But it's important for us to kind of get to see those numbers in order to really understand who we are talking about when we talk about the Black diaspora, the Black population, especially in the United States. But I think one of the reasons it's important to understand this is because also when we think about migration, when we think about why migration is a Black issue, not only because migration has always been a part of Black history, but because migration and the way that the policies have been created around migration has always centered whiteness. From the very beginning, when it comes to who is considered a human being in the United States, who is considered good enough to receive certain privileges, whether those privileges are the privileges of citizenship, whether that's birthright citizenship or naturalized citizenship. And we all must remember that even the reason we have birthright citizenship is because of Black liberation, Black revolutionaries, Black people who stood up and said that we deserve to be recognized as fully human, that those who had come to the United States, who had been forced to come to the Americas, had been born here, had just as much right to the benefits of citizenship as anyone else. And so now when we look at the immigration, not only the policies that this country has really focused on, we know that it's not policies that really benefit Black people, that has not benefited Black migrants, and that Black migrants often experience disparate outcomes, disparate experiences, discrimination within the immigration system, within the governmental system of this country. Black immigrants are more likely to be detained and deported because of an alleged criminal offense. We know, we see the data, we see the extrajudicial killings of our people. We see the outrage and the outpouring of resistance from our people because of what continues to happen to us at the hands of police, at the hands of immigration police or local police. And we know that immigration is a racial justice issue because the way that immigration has been shaped has always been racialized.
Yes.
So thank you. So moving on to the next slide, I just wanted to quickly show as well why Black migration, not only Black migration, but also issues of just economies as well as just peace. Our efforts to work for a freer, more just world have always been and will continue to be a Black issue. So if we could move to the next slide. Go to the next slide, Barbara. Yes, perfect. So part of the disparate outcomes and experiences and within our community, the importance of recognizing the deficit, the generational deficit that our communities continue to not only survive through, finding ways to thrive through, but the numbers are really important for us, again, to ground ourselves in an understanding of when we are struggling for justice, for liberation, we're doing so in multiple areas, not simply in just one or two or three, but because they overlap, because our solidarity is entwined, our liberation is entwined, it's imperative for us to understand what we're dealing with in order to know what we are striving for. And so the realities when it comes to the economies is that Black families often are making far less money, have less accumulated wealth than white families. Some of these numbers from the Pew Research Center, just to give us an understanding of what we're working with, what the aggregate data tells us about how our communities are continuing to struggle, and the ways that we are often pitted against one another within our community. So Black migrants against Black US born Black citizens against Black migrants, with the idea that Black migrants are taking away jobs from Black US born citizens, when the reality is that we are all in this together, because we are all working against a system that profits off of our exploitation, that profits off of our labor, that profits off of our bodies without truly valuing them. So we see that not only in the economies of money, but we also see that in the ways that Black bodies are treated in the United States, regardless of where you come from. Because when the police stop you as a Black person, they're not asking for your country of origin. They see you as a Black person, and then the system treats you accordingly. And so it's really important. Also, just wanted to make sure for us to understand that disproportionate treatment, happens at all levels. It happens, it feeds, these disparities feed the profit-driven systems that we have of within the detention and deportation system. And it is all of these issues that overlap, that not the only things that bring us together, but are really the driving force towards our shared solidarity. And so next slide. So I wanted us to, as Barbara moves us to the next slide, to really understand that when we talk about solidarity within the Black diaspora, we're not talking about something that just started yesterday. It didn't start on January 20th of 2025 when the second Trump administration went into power. This solidarity has been generational, and it has been ongoing for decades, for years and years and years. And for some folks who may know about the Pan-African movement, historically during the 1960s was happening at the same time as the civil rights movement, was happening at the same time as the African independence movement, because our ancestors, those that we descended from, understood that interlocked solidarity, that connected struggle, because the same systems that were oppressing people here in the United States were also oppressing people on the continent and in the Caribbean. We understood that the powers of colonialism, the systems that came out of the slave trade that turned into what we now know as capitalism, all of those were our systems of oppression that work across the diaspora and take on many forms, but they are ones that have brought people together from the beginning. And so, as Anyango was saying about this neo-diaspora, we are the children of the civil rights movement. Many of the rights that we enjoy today were born out of that civil rights movement, were born out of the African movements for independence. And so now, as the descendants, the grandchildren, the great-grandchildren of those folks who came before, we now take on the mantle of that struggle, because it is not separated from us. It is not something that happened to other people somewhere else in the world. This is a struggle. This is something that we have inherited. And so we can learn from the past. We can learn what our forefathers and our foremothers and our foreparents did for us, so that we can use that as the stepping stones to continue to build, create, and connect together in order to continue to build a movement that is truly inclusive of all of our experiences, all of our voices, so that we can truly see with a clear eye the systems that we are trying to change. So And part of the reason for that is not just because we have this shared history, but it's because something that's very unique within the Black diaspora, and I think is unique within diasporas, which is an ongoing connection to that homeland, whether it is directly through still having family and community members in home countries, back home, or it is through that spiritual and that ancestral connection, that deep connection of knowing if you go back far enough, we are all from Africa, right? We are all descended from the continent. And so it is an example of what transformative community building can look like. And it is something that we at AFSC value highly and are finding ways to nurture it both locally as well as within our organization totally. And so my question for you all to chew on, feel free to answer in the chat. That is, how do you show solidarity with Black and African people in your community? And solidarity looks a lot of different ways. I want to share a little bit about what we do locally. I know I only have a few more minutes, so I'll try to wrap this up a little bit. But just to share a little bit of what we do locally in New Hampshire, in the New Hampshire program, when it comes to building solidarity, both within the Black and African diaspora community in New Hampshire, as well as across the organization with our Black and African diaspora colleagues, and for you to take that as some inspiration for what you can do at home or where you can plug into. So please take a moment. I'll ask Barbara to skip to the next slide so you can see the question. So please take a moment and share with us how you show solidarity with Black and African people in your community. And then I'll go to the next slide and just share a little bit of what we are doing. And so these are just some pictures, just some general ideas of what we have done, we continue to do in New Hampshire. We do community organizing. We have a Black and African diaspora group that meets every other week to connect, to build, to get to know one another, because movement building, solidarity is built through relationships. We have a history of solidarity within the diaspora, but it still necessitates trust, it necessitates dialogue, it necessitates safe spaces for people to gather and to share and to connect. It also relies on partners. So we have statewide coalitions that focus on showing up and being visible presences outside of the ICE headquarters that we have here in the state, that shows up during state legislative and municipal meetings, shows up with our members of Congress, raising our voice on issues that matter the most to us. It also shows up in rapid response networks that are created amongst people, especially right now with the amount of immigration enforcement that is occurring in our communities, the amount of fear and trepidation people are having and not knowing where and what to do. It grows out of that because people know that we must take care of each other. In order to take care of each other, we not only need to know one another, we need to stand and we need to stay connected with each other using the tools at our disposal in order to do so. It also includes trainings and instructions, so webinars like this, spaces for information sharing and skill building, in-person trainings through community, whatever skills you have that you can contribute to your community, especially when it comes to ensuring that people know what their rights are, that people know that where they can connect with, where they can plug in, and who they can plug into. All of that is critical. It also, for us, includes a detention visitation program. Because we have a detention center in our state, it could include detention visitation programs in your state, places for you to plug in and put your time and your energy and your willingness to accompany people when they need it the most. And of course, accompaniment, which looks like mutual aid, legal and social support, really building relationships with people who have the legal knowledge, the skills, the know-how, and people who are willing to donate their time, perhaps their homes, to give a ride, to give money to support, but knowing again that it is us who must take care of ourselves. And of course, last but never least is the sanctuary networks and congregations of people of faith who come together to say that we will not stand for an administration that does more than just promote hate. I almost just said promote, but that really inoculates hate, that we will stand with our values, in our values, and that we will work together because we are stronger together to resist all this and anything that would tear our communities apart. So those are just some things for you all to just kind of chew on, to share with you all how we as Black people, that we are much more expansive and inclusive than you could, initially imagine, that we are growing, that we are many strong, and that solidarity has been built historically, personally, and through that solidarity, we can create all these different ways to resist, build, and protect one another.
Thank you so much, Grace. You did an amazing job and gave us a lot to think about. People put a lot of really good ideas in the chat. Some people said that they don't have a large Black population in their communities, but I think participating in a seminar like this, a webinar like this, is an important step. Getting information and being able to digest what is being said today. Working with groups serving African refugees, listening to stories, voting, organizing around issues that affect Black populations. Those are such important things that people are doing to protect and build solidarity. So we thank you so much. We're going to shift gears a little bit here and go to Serge, but I want to remind everybody that if you have comments in general, you can put them in the chat. And if you have questions specifically for the speakers, you can put them in the Q&A section. Thank you for the team that's working behind the scenes to answer questions in real time. So we have an amazing dynamic group of people who are making sure that even with 722 people, that your questions and your concerns are being addressed. And so I'm going to turn it over to you, Serge. Serge has a few minutes to just talk to us about his work and his perspective on this issue. So welcome, Serge.
Yeah, thank you so much, Anyango. It's a pleasure to discuss some of the findings of our work here today. I am going to get down to some of the very concrete information and the reality on the ground when you are a Black migrant. What makes us stand out compared to when you're dealing with the broader immigration movement? Because there's something very special, just the way, the brutality that the Black migrants go through and the way they are unfairly targeted. It's very important for folks to understand that when you start to understand how Black migrants are targeted, the way they are more likely to be arrested, to be detained and deported. And based on a study conducted by ACLU, I believe, Black migrants are 3 times more likely to be deported compared to any other ethnic group. And that number must speak to us. And when you look at the number that the Grace has given us, that we're just about, 7% of the population of the migrant groups. So, which means that something must be happening along the way that makes us more targeted. Obviously, the history of the way Black folks have been subjugated, treated, and mistreated in this country, dating back from slavery. And that same story still follows us. And Grace said that when you are arrested in a car or on the street, they look at the Black person and they know that you are meant to go through a very rough process in the hands of the police. And we've seen that, and we've seen into our prison and jails how the Black population is, most of the time, the majority of the people who are incarcerated. And we've seen the waves of people have been let go because when they went back to DNA, they discovered that these folks did not commit the crime, but they just wanted a Black body to put and to close that chapter in the history of that particular tribunal. So that's the same story when it comes to migrants. And I've seen personally here in New Jersey how the majority of people who complain about the brutality of the system, of the detention system, most of the time are Black migrants. And they are mistreated in the way that is just unconscionable. And so these are some of the issues that make us be very concerned And I mean, of course, I need to start with my name. My name is Serge Demefak. I am the Black Immigrant Justice Project Coordinator at American Friends. And so I have one of the positions that, primarily focus on Black migrants. It's a privilege to be at that position, but it's also a big challenge because, the sheer amount of things that you discover in the course of the work, it's so overwhelming. And so we've seen over the past few years that the Black population has increased. The Black migrant population has increased, in particular in some of those big cities, in New York, in New Jersey, for example, places like Miami. And we've also seen the policy of the U.S. government back then when you were coming as an immigrant through Miami, if you were Cuban, you could just come in. And as soon as you land, they will keep you in. But when you come as a Haitian, it wasn't the same treatment. So they were like same situation, two separate treatment. And those are the laws of the United States. Just to tell you how the color of your skin can define the way you are treated. And we saw that. And one of the things that I want to point out here is about how the expansion of that criminalization of the immigration process, in particular for Black people and for all immigrants, but the Black people being those who are going through a treatment that's completely inhumane. And obviously, this is not something that happened overnight. We saw, for example, the what we call in our movement the 1996, laws that were actually signed by Bill Clinton that definitely criminalized extensively, some of the basic crimes that are out there, and creating this new, expanding drastically the category of aggravated felonies, and to the point where even a very nonchalant act of stealing something in a store, turn that into an aggravated felony, and you can be deported. So the expansion of what can turn you into a person that's deportable, literally is fueling what you are seeing today. It didn't happen overnight. And we know that since the 80s, the expansion of the criminal justice system, when there was a time for us to think that the jail were going to be closing down, that we're going to be narrowing down, but we saw the way the private prison system has expanded drastically to the point where today, the so-called administrative detention, which is the immigration detention system, has now become a criminal detention, basically. Today, more than 70% of those who are deported go through the criminal justice system. So, and today we're talking more in terms of, the crimmigration system, which is a term that was coined, given that explosion and this interpenetration between the criminal justice system and the immigration system. And that has expanded drastically. And because Black folks are most likely to be targeted, they're most likely to be pinned down and given some crazy sentences. And even when they spend the time in prison, and when they're out of the prison, they funnel automatically into another detention process. And so they end up serving maybe 2 sentences for one single crime. The system of the so-called double jeopardy. So we are dealing here with this unique attack on Black migrants. Obviously, we see that across the board, but because we are most likely to be targeted, we are 3 times more likely to be targeted, which means that we are more in the position where we have to take extra step to protect ourselves. And I think being able to organize an event like this one and inform the community about the state of Black migration is so critical. Because if we don't have the information, we will not know how to respond in front of the situation. Now, and talking particularly on these laws that were passed in 1996, these laws literally accelerated the detention. The notion of mandatory detention was enforced since those laws. And obviously, in some cases, when folks are detained in prison, in immigration detention, in many cases, they denied bail. And this kind of denial of bail date back from those 1996 laws. So we have a system that's been built over the years. And today we have the current president, number 47, who is just exploiting that whole system that was put in place. and in many cases supported by, the party that was supposed to be protecting people. So I want to say that one of the other disturbing aspects is the way our local law enforcement have been instrumental in detaining people. We've seen county jails become, an opportunity, a business opportunity for our county jails. Here in New Jersey, our office fought very hard, AFSC in New Jersey fought very hard to help shut down the Essex County Jail for immigrants, the Hudson County Jail for immigrants, of course, we're still working hard to shut down the Elizabeth Detention Facility, which is another private prison right now, the only private prison in function. And we shut down the Bergen County Detention Center for immigrants. So, and that's some of the work that we've done here. I mean, and of course, we work in coalition to try to shut that down. And it wasn't easy to go against the laws like the 287G laws, who deputize some of our local law enforcement to work as ICE agent, thereby accelerating the detention and deportation of immigrants. So, and it's not because they were getting paid extra. The federal government wasn't even paying them for being deputized for that job. They were actually using our own local tax money to do this job. So, for me, it just means that we have to continue to work harder and to activate all our local politicians, all our local leaders, and to show up at the council meetings, to show up at the so-called the freeholders meetings, to demand that they shut down the detention facilities. And they, along the way, made a lot of money. We have counties here who made, I don't want to name names, they were making 24 million a year, 36 million a year. So selling our bodies in the system has fueled the economy, has become the bottom line for some of these local counties. And we need to fight against that. And obviously, we still have those private prisons that we're still fighting against, and we need to continue fighting. And especially Black folks must understand that this fight we're doing is something that's all of us, we need to be engaged in it. Not just Black folks, but anybody who cares about immigration must understand the way Black people are targeted, they're victimized, and we need to be strong when we face all of these issues. And we have data, we have information about how that's been structurally or systemically built over the course of the years, like with some of these laws that we're talking about, and how they are designed to have certain result for a certain population. Now, for example, I need to talk a little bit about how some of these policies that the U.S. is applying, is using, are being copied from other parts of the world. For example, in Europe, there have been policies for the whole Europe. There was something called the Return Directive passed by the European Union in 2008, which was like a comprehensive law designed, to do all kinds of extrajudiciary deportation that the U.S. is doing now, signing all kinds of externalization of their boundaries with countries like Libya, like Turkey. So these same policies are now being used in the U.S. We've seen the U.S. trying to, in fact, implement some of those policies in Guatemala, in Mexico, and we know very well, throughout Central America, we know very well that we've seen over the past 5-10 years, the number of Black migrants who have come to the border. I mean, this is a huge number of Black migrants coming from the Caribbean, primarily from Haiti, and increasingly coming from Africa, to the point where if you see some pictures of the Mexican border, you would think you're in an African country. And that's just the reality of what the situation has become. And I don't want to remind you what happened with the crisis of Del Rio, I believe in 2021, where we saw something reminiscent of the slave, years here in the United States. A white man on a horseback whipping, a Black migrant. And in fact, under that bridge, there were close to 7,000 Haitian migrants and other Black migrants. It was almost as if there was a whole population just moved just to be under that bridge. I think it was a very similar moment to really see how Black migrants are being treated. It was almost if they were selected. In fact, they were selected to be hidden under that bridge. about 7,000. And those 7,000 were all deported back to Haiti in the course of close to, I believe, 4 to 5 months, systematically. In the meantime, 90,000 Afghans were being moved into the U.S. I don't have nothing against Afghans or against any other groups, but that reality of deporting one group while bringing another group in, is something that kept us within the Black community feeling, we were very disturbed by that sort of imagery. So which means that there is certain clarity for me that Black people are especially targeted because it's a history. It's in the continuum of what has been the life of Black folks in America. That's our story. And that story is continuing, taking different shapes and taking different forms. But we need to follow, very often the money. We need to follow, even sometimes, the voice of some of our detractors to understand the way they are using it to build their narrative. And we heard our current president call, African country SH countries, while doing his campaign back in 1915. That's something that they could have given us the kind of indication beyond just the fact that he was calling, Mexican rapists and all of that. But he has a special name for Black migrants. They need to go to the SH country, right? So he knew that these people have a special place in his mind. And with that kind of mentality, you can just expect the level of it's a unique policy designed to just crush, Black folks. But we are going to resist. We are going to push back, and we are going to continue working hard so that we don't continue to fall under those traps. Now, here in New Jersey, we are working hard. As I've explained, we've managed to shut down 3 jails. We've managed to, build a team of lawyers who are taking cases. And many of our cases are cases that have a connection with the criminal justice system, as I explained earlier. So we have a lot more work. We need better attorneys, to be able to defend us. And I'm very excited to work with along the side of our legal team who are tackling these cases, learning as a group in the process, because immigration is not just immigration anymore. You have to know the criminal justice to be able to take a serious immigration case. And that's how things are changing along the way. I see a question here that are there countries who receive immigrants more gracefully than we do?
African immigrants specifically.
African immigrants.
Yeah.
Now, I'm going to give you an example. For example, I'm going to look at Europe, right? In Europe, places like Spain is taking a lot more, I think more than 1.5 million. And places like Portugal, places like Germany, and the country that you hear the most, like UK or France, they were at the bottom of those countries that are receiving people. And of course, if you look at places like Spain, it's mostly because the population of Spain is shrinking. They actually have a natality rate that's regressing. I believe 5 years ago, the population has shrunk by something like 6%. And it's also a country that needs more manpower to help build their homes, that the retired folks from UK are coming there and buying as second homes, to help do their tomato farms, because tomato business in Spain is a major business. And they are also using that tomato to flood the market in Europe. And Europeans don't like it that Africans are now helping countries like Spain and Portugal, build their, agricultural economy. So but I also have to say that the number have increased recently in the United States, especially because there are now new pathways. For example, folks taking planes in Africa, landing in places like El Salvador, until recently, which was free to enter and exit. But Salvador, over the past 2 years, have decided that all Africans coming in must pay $1,000 before they exit. It's almost like a duty tax. And if you don't pay that, you're going to be blocked at the airport. So it has become a money making, and it's not different than the coyote that we see here in the desert in Mexico, who are requiring a bribe to lead people who are migrating towards the north. So there's definitely we will never be able to stop the flow of migrants. It's just a natural progression. And I want to say that it's going to continue that way. But we need to also continue to work to improve countries where we know there are challenges. Now we know the instability that's in Africa. And obviously, when you look at some of the situation in Africa, some of these situations are completely built up. We know what's happening in Congo right now. We know the instability there that's manufactured. Countries where European countries in general or Western countries are just going there and mining the resources. And that's creating a lot of instability. And sometimes they use that stability to just continue to plunder whatever is in that country to fuel the Western economy. So it is a very complex web of instability, economic instability, and also the struggle to be able to sustain a living. That's pushing people out of Africa because of that instability. We've had over the past 10 years close to, 8 coups in maybe only 5 countries. So you have one country having, 2 coups in 4 years. And this is because of the way the developed world has completely, played itself into the way the economy is set up. Obviously, there's a change happening in Africa right now and also in other different countries, but the US should be part of the solution, not just continue to create problems. We know what's happening in Haiti right now, where the US is totally involved. But some of these instabilities, I think that are fixable, and I believe so. And I also think that we need to work very closely with the folks who have stayed back home. And I know AFAC has a large international program. We're trying to inform ourselves and trying to build some of those networks to see how we can even support those who have been deported back to the place they come from. Because when they return, they're even more in danger. So our work is not just at the level of just seeing how we can support those who are here, but supporting those who have returned and seeing how we can build certain networks to protect them back home and to also, teach those lessons to those countries where there are struggling groups. And so one of the things that the US has, for example, done was to do some sort of like a mass deportation in some countries. That don't necessarily have to be the country where you come from. And we've seen that from Europe, where the UK government is now deporting people was signed an agreement to deport people in Rwanda, regardless where you come from. If you come from the Middle East, they can send you to Rwanda. If you come from Senegal, they'll send you to Rwanda. So, and these are situations that we've also seen right here, in the South American continent. We've seen the US deport people in places, and AFAC in some cases had fought very hard to have some of those illegal deportations be returned even to the US. We've had some rare successes, which is not something that's very current, that's very recurrent. But we believe that by staying, steadfast, by staying focused, by knowing the reality of these communities where, there's a compounding effect of all of these criminal system and immigration system that's actually destroying our communities. But we need to continue to build education. For example, this summer I'm organizing a special program here at in Newark for young migrants, young Black migrants, to serve so that they can be the future in their communities. Because these folks come from communities where, for a long time, the government has been extremely dictatorial and crushed community members. So we need to change that dynamic and start to empower the new generation, because their parents are still afraid of confronting the system, of taking the step to protect the people and to demand that our politicians do better, that they make better choices. So one of the things that we're also doing is we have a special legislation that we're pushing, which is called S3672, which is also called the Immigrant Trust Act here in New Jersey. That legislation that we're working on right now is designed to protect immigrants who are seeking support from the government, if you are seeking social services, and to basically stop all state agencies, staff, and employees from sharing the immigrants' information to local law enforcement or to the federal immigration system. Because we've seen cases here where someone who went into a particular office to seek services has basically been reported to ICE and being picked up in his neighborhood simply because the person providing the service just took the phone and said, we have someone here who's undocumented, who doesn't have the full paperwork, you need to come pick him up. And we've seen that happen time and time again. Local immigration officers coming into the local jails, literally just walking into police stations and asking if there's anybody of interest in these spaces. We've seen local law enforcement here in Essex County take the phone and call ICE and tell them that there's someone here that you may want to meet. So, and that kind of attitude is something that this law is supposed to stop. And if this law passes, it's going to be a sea change in New Jersey. We are going to be able, as immigrants, to go seek for services without being afraid, to send our kids to school without being afraid, to be able to report a crime without being afraid that by reporting a crime, you're exposing yourself. And in many cases, these are services we are entitled to as immigrants. But because of the way there are not enough protections, we are afraid of getting, and we are afraid of, going out there and seeking that service and seeking the support. And this is in a state like New Jersey that has more than 40% of foreign born. So you're looking at a major chunk of the state population that does not have access to basic services, even though they are contributing their fair share to the budget of the state. So I'm going to post maybe perhaps some, yes, I see here it's S3672. That's the bill number. And it's also called the Immigrant Trust Act. It's a very important bill, and I think that's the most important bill that we've worked on so far. And we've been receiving a lot of pushback from local elected officials, from local leaders, but we believe that it's the right thing, and we need to fight for that. It's going to protect Black immigrants. It's going to protect other communities. It's going to protect everybody. Because if you have a state where your neighbor is afraid, you should be afraid too. Because you may need that neighbor who's maybe a migrant, who will be the one, I don't know, pouring some water on your house in fire.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So we need a community where we're all united.
Yes.
We need a community where we are all working together, where we can really stand shoulder to shoulder and share the brotherhood that, some of our great leaders talk about, that Martin Luther King, in fact, talked about. So I'm going to stop here for now. But I see some other information here. I see that we've posted some of these
Serge,
from our space.
I'm giving you homework.
Yes.
So while I bring on the thematic directors, you can be looking at the chat because some of the questions are specifically directed to you, some clarification. Our work at FSC is divided into, so thank you, Serge. Let me say that. Thank you, Serge. Thank you, Grace. You see the brilliant minds I get to work with, and that's why I love my job at FSC. I get to work with these passionate, brilliant, beautiful people. So I'm very honored to be in this dialogue with you, Serge. Grace and I are just visitors to this discussion, and so we're happy to be here. So I'm protect, resist, and build. Remember that. We want you to keep that in the back of your minds. FSC works on, our work is divided into 3 themes: just migration, just economy, and just peace. Unfortunately, our director of just migration had to jump off to another meeting because we always multitasking here at FSC. But we have our just migration director, Lewis Webb, and just economies, Rick Wilson, and Lewis, I think, is going to cover both just peace and just migration. So I'm going to turn it over to you for a few minutes, and then I'll come back and do the next closing things. Lewis, are you on?
Yeah, I'm here.
Okay.
Couldn't find the unmute button.
It happens like that.
It does, right? It's inevitable, it seems. So before you heard me, my first word was wow. As we were visioning this series of Third Tuesdays, Protect, Resist, and Build, one of the concerns we raised in every conversation was, how do we avoid this being a, just a list of all of the injustices that are being rained down upon us and just burdening people with more things to stress about? And the answer is because we're here, right? We're here with energy. We're here together. I've been looking at the chat and the number of where do I step up? How do I step into this? That's exactly what we were envisioning. And so it's super exciting to join you all in this conversation and to represent our Just Peace work. And I've also have the opportunity to share a little bit about our Just Migration work because Amy, as you said, Anyango had to move on to another meeting. But Amy did share a little bit about what she would have said, which I'm going to put in the chat because I know that my memory at this time of night is not adequate enough to remember everything she said to me. So I'm going to put it in the chat and hopefully you all will have a chance to read, to read the updates that Amy wanted to share. And, understandably, she starts with acknowledging it's a rough time to be an undocumented immigrant in this country, right? But it's not just those who are dealing with the roughness. I think as a community, any of us who are struggling means we all are struggling because our vision for justice has to be universal. And so as we talk about the different themes that AFSC works on, it's super important to understand the intersectionality across them. And so, Amy acknowledges that, deportations are up, all of the things that we hear. I think President 47, is that how we're referring to it, has issued some 60 plus executive orders. 99% of them are meant to cause harm. And the immigrant community has certainly been targeted with a number of them. But we're doing what we have to do. We're protecting our community members. We're resisting all of these injustices that are being put forth. And most importantly, we are building a response. And so there are opportunities across the immigration work for us to help people know their rights, to bear witness, to acknowledge, what's going on, and to tell the story for those who are being silenced by deportation and other cruel acts of injustice. And really to stand alongside, alignment, allyship is super important in this time. And so I think Amy is asking us to do all we can to walk alongside and protect, resist, and build with our immigration colleagues and community members, immigrant colleagues and community members at this time. Amy did send a quick message to me to also make sure I mentioned, the hypocrisy. Recently, number 47 said we're going to open our borders to white South Africans, right? At a time where there has been a constant America first, only Americans, close our borders. But all of a sudden, there's a slight opening for a particular sector of Africans, right? And so as we continue to do this work, we must not lose sight of the racial component of all of what is being presented to us. So let's do what we have to do to step up and step into this effort to protect, resist, and build as our immigrant colleagues struggle in this very unique and frustrating moment for them all, Black and all others. We also are doing some peace building work. And I think there was a slide that just invited you to go to afsc.org, our website, which has a very clear section where you can take action. And in the peace building world, there are a number of places where we are asking people to step up. AFSC's peace building work looks at militarization and the need to demilitarize our budget, the need to protect communities that are targeted by the carceral system, prisons and policing, to help communities become stronger, to protect the civil liberties that are being trampled by number 47 in that administration. But if you look on the screen now, you'll see just 4 opportunities where you can step into this work with us. And those are all to be found on afsc.org website. And it's a very, straightforward way to be part of the movement to protect, resist, and build. You go on our website, you'll see a section that says take action, and you can reach out to whoever has the control over the issue. Normally it's Congress, although we're seeing that we might have to redirect all of our messages to Musk because he seems to have a level of control in our government that it's hard to understand. I wanted to say something else, but I'll leave it there. But yeah, please join us in all of these efforts as we commit to protecting communities, not just in the US, but around the world that are being targeted right now. Clearly, the attack at foreign aid, no doubtedly, is targeted at Black and Brown communities around the world. And we have to step up and challenge Congress to not cede their authority to the executive branch and to Musk and Doge, but to do their, constitutional requirement and protect communities around the world with humanitarian aid, stop sending weapons to destroy communities, both in Sudan, Gaza, and all other places where we continue to support efforts to undermine and destroy and even execute a genocide around the world. So let's all do what we can to really protect communities that we know this administration is targeting. And the last one is one that's dear to my heart. I have spent most of my life working on the rights of those who have been entwined in the criminal legal system. And if you are sensitive at all to democracy, the right to vote is something that should never be taken away. And so we invite you to take action to restore voting rights to all who have been undermined in their role in this country because of felon disenfranchisement. So I'm going to now invite my colleague Rick to talk a little bit about how our Just Economies work is intertwined in all that we've talked about today, and to give us opportunities to use that platform to protect, resist, and build. Rick, are you still with us?
I'm still here. Can you hear me?
I can.
Great success. And Yango told me 3 minutes, and I always unquestionably obey her in all things. So just to state the obvious, my work is on U.S. economic justice. And to state the obvious, economic elites are using racism and anti-immigrant ideology to push through their agenda, playing on social tensions that arise at a time of historic inequality to push through things that are going to be damaging to everyone. And, people have studied why is it that the United States is stingy in terms of social benefits and programs like universal health care, debt-free higher education, child family supports, and it typically comes down to racism. That is the thing that has divided people, that's used to justify that. Poverty has been painted in racialized terms going back to Ronald Reagan, who was, I think, the one who initiated this downhill spiral that we're circulating through now. And Congress in the House of Representatives is preparing a budget that would literally take billions of dollars in assistance away from programs like SNAP, which provides basic food assistance for very low income Americans for 40 million people in this country. It obviously is not generous enough to people who, whose legal status, immigration status is, complicated. But there'll be a huge amount of harm. They're planning catastrophic cuts to Medicaid, which covers 70 million people, opens the path to recovery from addiction, keeps rural and urban hospitals open. Cutting it that much would be murder by policy. And that's just a few of the things that are going on. But I would just like to say instead, what can we actually do? And I think I was on a call couple of weeks ago and someone laid it out. So this, in a few short words, I think is where we are now, especially with the federal situation. One, we need to stop whatever can be stopped. That's one thing. Work as hard as we can to do that. What we can't stop, we should try to delay. What we can't stop or delay, we should try to mitigate or reduce the harm. When the harm is done, we need to document it. We need to look for opportunities to organize opposition as this happens, and we need to lay the foundation so that we can all move ahead. And I just want to say at this time, if you've been watching the news in the last couple of weeks, the catastrophic fires that happened in Los Angeles, the catastrophic floods that have swept through a large part of the country, including the place where I live, including my house, there might be a need to have actually a functioning government that does things to promote basic human needs and support people in times like this. Instead, they're trying to burn things down. So this is, I believe, an all hands on deck in so many ways. I will stop there. And Yango, and I did it in under 3.
You did
Do I
amazing.
get crab cakes for that at some point?
Absolutely, absolutely. Thank you so much, Rick and Lewis. And we have one more item that we want to touch on before we officially close. So, Syra, I'm just going to turn it over to you. And then
Everybody,
when you're
Uh,
done, throw it back to me when you're done, okay?
I will. Hey,
Okay.
everybody, my name is Saida. I'm the AFSC New Mexico director. I just want to thank everyone who's on this call who maybe has been part of the lawsuits. I know we have a lot of Quakers here. And if you are one of the Quakers whose meeting is in the lawsuit about the repealing of sensitive spaces, could you raise your hand or put something in the chat? Because I know that there are a lot of friends and people of faith that's one action that people have taken is the courts. So grateful for that. I'm going to teach a skill as we close out because I know people want to know what can we do. And this skill is called the salute method. There's a picture of it on the screen, and I'm going to just walk you through it. Because here in Albuquerque, can we go back? Here in Albuquerque, one issue that we had in my community is that there were a lot of rumors that spread the last few weeks of people who thought they were seeing ice. And this was causing a lot of terror, actually, in my city. And I know people had good intentions and they wanted to try to help warn people, but almost all of the rumors were false. And so I was teaching people in my city this salute method. I actually had a pastor come up to me on Sunday and said, I learned it from you and I taught my whole congregation. And it's really helped to reduce rumors and misinformation. And that's important because it's hard for people to make plans if they have wrong information. So the salute method is an acronym. It's here on your screen. But when you hear a rumor of ice, like we were hearing in my city, it helps to just ask some questions. Or if you're reporting that you are seeing something, it helps to give details so people can plan. And so the first letter is S, the size. And so there was a rumor that ice was at the emergency room of my hospital. And this was a really dangerous rumor, because that made people afraid who needed life-threatening, had life-threatening situation. And so when I heard the rumor, I actually went to the emergency room and I asked, how many ICE agents? And one person said 3, and one person said 2, and one person said 1. And so it was all over the place. And I realized that none of the people saying it were in the emergency room. And so knowing the size is really helpful. Asking that question or sharing that if you see something, being able to say how many you see. The activity, what is ICE doing? If there's a rumor that ICE is, so someone said ICE is on Central and 3rd, and I went down there and it was Border Patrol, it wasn't ICE, and they were at a bar. They were actually hanging out at a bar. They were off work. So being able to say the activity is very helpful for people to know what are they doing. The location is so important. There was a rumor in my city that ICE was on Central, and it was going over social media, and people said, spread the word, ICE is on Central. Well, if you live in Albuquerque, Central is one of the longest streets in my city. So that's really, really vague. I found the Border Patrol was at Central and 3rd. That really helped, to give a specific location about what you're seeing so that, if people are afraid to drive on Central, that means they can't get to work. They can't pick up their kids from school. Like they're terrified to use that road. And that wasn't what was happening. The uniform, this one is really important. A lot of people don't know what ICE looks like. And so the person who said ICE is in the emergency room, that really dangerous rumor, it was actually a prison guard. And the back of his vest said MDC, Metropolitan Detention Center. That is not ICE. That was a prison guard taking a prisoner to the emergency room. So by looking at the uniform, we were able to clarify that there was no ICE in the ER. And so that was really important. The time is important. When people say, I saw ICE, when I was asked to go downtown, when did you see ICE? 6 o'clock. Okay, it's 6:10. I think I could go down there and see if they're still there. And again, it was Border Patrol, not ICE. Versus if they said 8 a.m. and now it's 6 o'clock, they're probably not there anymore. So showing the time is really important. And the last one is equipment and weapons. So if you see ICE and they have a bus, that could signify a raid of taking a lot of people, or if they're handcuffing people. So all of these things can just help people to get as accurate information as possible. But in the situation here, what we found was most people couldn't answer these questions because they weren't really seeing the thing that they thought. And so by asking the questions, we got more accurate information. So I just wanted to share that as a skill for you all to use. And I hope it works as well. It's helped our community cut down on false information. And that has brought the terror level down a little bit for people in my community. I'll send it back over to you, Onyango.
Thank you so much. That is very helpful. I like these really practical tools. Some people are asking if you can download it in the chat, and I heard you cannot, but maybe there's other ways that we can share this, and we're going to share the recording and other things. So we are at the point where we are closing. So I just want to, before I officially close, I want to say thank you to the planning team for the Third Tuesdays, which is Jennifer, Rick, Lewis, Amy, Syra, Keith, Mary, Barbara. Thank you so much for all that you've done to plan this really amazing series for us. We are learning a lot. We are being challenged. So thank you very much. Thank you, Summer, for doing the meeting support for us. Barbara also has been doing the slides, so we recruited her to do that as well as being part of the planning. And of course, I want to thank our panelists here, Serge and Grace, for the wealth of information that they shared. So just really, really grateful to you. And thank you for all of our AFSC colleagues and friends and family members who supported this event. Like I mentioned at the beginning, for those who came on late, we had 722 people registered. So that is really exciting. Stay tuned for other conversations on Black migrants and other issues affecting Black communities. We are committed to doing this, so please make sure you stay tuned. The next third Tuesday will be on March 18th, so mark your calendars. I've heard a rumor that it's going to be around women's issues. Barbara, if you could close the slide so that they can see these beautiful faces of these panelists. If you're not part of our mailing list, please make sure you're plugged in so that you can get this and other announcements and how you can protect, resist, and build. And I just want to encourage everybody, as I said in my opening, we're just encouraging people to take care of ourselves, take care of each other. It's so important in this chaotic political environment that we're in. So just find ways to foster community, to dance, to laugh, to eat good food, whatever you can do to find joy and to find peace in the midst of all of this chaos that we are experiencing right now. Whenever I close a session, I always like to close with some kind of breathing. And so I want us to just focus in. We've had a lot of information. So the information was here. Maybe the information set in your stomach. You were carrying a lot of anxiety as you heard all of this information, and you were wondering, what do I do with all of this? And so it's so important that we release, right? And so I want to invite you to breathe with me. And it turns out that breathing is very, very important for us as human beings. So this is actually going to help you. So I'm going to count. And when I say count to 8, and you're going to hold for 8, breathe in for 8, and then you're going to hold it for 4, and then you're going to release it for 8. Okay. All right. And the panel here with your beautiful faces are going to model this for you. Okay. All right. So everybody, if you're comfortable closing your eyes, make sure you do that. And so I'm going to count 1, 2, 3. So count, breathe in, hold for 8, breathe out, breathe in, 1, breathe out. We're going to do this one more time. Breathe in. Thank you so much for everybody for participating, for being engaged in the chat. We're sorry if we didn't get to all of your questions or comments, but we're going to look through them and make sure we respond as we can. I want you to remember the Swahili phrase I taught you, pamoja tutashinda, which means together we win. Thank you, everybody. Bye.
Thank you, everyone. Good night.
Night.